Hello and welcome to the Ghosts and Folklore podcast. I'm Mark Rees, and on each episode I investigate a different, weird and wonderful subject. And on this episode I hope you are all feeling romantic, because we are going to look at the folklore, at the history and the traditions surrounding the patron saint of love in Wales and the wonderful island that she made her home. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking already. You're thinking, the patron saint of love, surely you mean St Valentine. Surely you mean St Valentine, the Roman patron saint of love, who is celebrated on February the 14th throughout certainly the English-speaking world at least. And as I've just discovered via the magic of Wikipedia, which, as we know, is never wrong. You can always rely on Wikipedia 100%. But apparently, St. Valentine's Day, the tradition, spread through the English-speaking Christian countries, as you would imagine, and they say in a similar way to Halloween and Christmas, it has been adopted by a lot of other countries. And would you believe it, the most money is spent on Valentines in East Asian countries, in Singapore, in China, and in South Korea, which I would not have guessed myself, but there you go, you learn something new every day. But anyway, this isn't about St. Valentine's. This is about a saint who spoke in the Welsh language, and her name was not Valentine or Cupid or anything else similar. Her name was Dwynwen, D-W-Y-N-E-N, Dwynwen, and her full name in Welsh, rather than saint, is Santes. That's the feminine for saint in Welsh. Sant is a male saint, Santes is a female saint, and her full name is Santes Dwynwen. And we celebrate Dydd Santes Dwynen, St Dwynwen's Day, on January the 25th. And if you don't celebrate this already, I'm going to let you into a little trick here, which I probably shouldn't put on record in a podcast. But if you want to really treat your significant other and save a couple of pounds at the same time, why not surprise them this January the 25th with some Dydd Santes Dwynen treats? Because unlike February the 14th, where the prices are doubled on a bunch of red roses and you can't book a table anywhere because everything is fully booked, January the 25th, Dydd Santes Dwynen is still considered, maybe it won't be after this podcast goes out, but it's still considered, for the time being at least, just a regular day for so many people. So why not save yourself some money, be extra romantic, celebrate the Welsh way, never mind Valentine's, celebrate Dydd Santes Dwynen. Now, the story of Dwynwen and the island which is now named after her is a wonderful mix of old folklore and folk tales with some historical fact. I mean, there's no denying this wonderful beauty spot off the coast of Anglesey is there right now. You can go and visit, and I strongly recommend you do as well. But the life story of Dwynwen herself, well, this is a story which has been embellished over the years. It's one which there are many variations of, and a lot of the elements of this story are consistent. Some of them do change. There's one quite major change in some versions of this story, which we'll come to. So what I'd like to do with this episode is, to begin with, we look at the traditional story of Dwynwen, and then we will look at more of the concrete facts surrounding the island she called home. So, to begin at the beginning, as Dylan Thomas would say, to begin at the beginning, Dwynwen was a 5th century saint, and her life was far from easy. If you believe the story, she turned her back on love for herself in order to bring it to others, hence why she became a saint. Now, while there are variations on who exactly she was and where she came from, the most widely believed version is that she was the daughter of King Brychan Brycheiniog, a king who had a fantastic amount of children and a fantastic amount of mothers to those children as well. But her mother is assumed to be the queen consort at the time. Now, Dwynwen fell in love with a Welsh prince called Maelon de Fodryll, who may or may not have been a prince, but just go with it. Let's assume he is a Welsh prince for the sake of this story. And Maelon was a man she could never be with because her father refused the union. For purely selfish reasons, he had already arranged for Dwynwen to marry someone which would increase his power. He did not want her just going off and marrying this Maelon. And when she broke the news to Maelon, he did not take it well at all. Now, this is where the story gets very controversial in some tellings, where it gets very, very dark. It's dark in all tellings, but the severity of the darkness. Now, he takes it badly. And in the version which is most repeated, and this could be purely because the other version makes it quite difficult to tell, certainly to children, he verbally abuses her. He is very unhappy, and in no uncertain terms, he makes this known through calling her whatever he does, whatever he says. He reduces her to tears. She is distraught and she is not happy. Now, in the other versions, Maelon does physically attack Dwynwen, and this, of course, makes an already terrible, terrible scene that much worse. But whether it is from verbally attacking or physically attacking or a combination of both, Maelon leaves Dwynwen in tears. She is distraught and she turns to the only person left she can think of who can help her, and that is God. She runs off into the forest. She seeks solace. She wants to get away from the world, to get away from people. And when there, she prays and she prays and she prays. And would you believe it? Her prayers appear to be answered. An angel appears to Dwynwen with a potion. And she is told that this potion will help her erase all memories of Maelon from her head. She prayed and prayed and prayed for an end to this heartache, and there was an angel offering her just that. All she had to do was to drink this potion, and like that, he would be gone. But there was more. It went one step further. It didn't just erase him from her mind. He, in turn, was frozen into a block of ice. His punishment for treating such a kind soul so badly was to be frozen into a block of ice. But now, Dwynwen had a clear mind now. She could think properly, and despite everything that had happened, she wanted to make things right. And she turned back to God and she prayed for 3 wishes. Now, you might think this is getting a bit greedy. I mean, a lot of people don't get any wishes granted. She's already had a major wish granted, and now she's looking back up and saying, can I have some more, please? Like Oliver. But no, she's asking for 3 more wishes, and possibly because God knows the truth. He knows what's inside her heart. He knows of her selfless nature. He agrees. He says, okay, or rather the angels come back and she is granted her 3 wishes. And her first wish is to thaw Maelon from his icy prison, despite what he has done. And now with all that pain erased from her mind, she does not want somebody else suffering and not given the chance to redeem themselves. And so she uses one of her 3 wishes to thaw him from his icy prison, and hopefully he does indeed turn over a new leaf. Her second wish is also selfless. She asks God to take care of all true lovers. And failing that, if two people are destined to part, if they're destined to not be together, as she was with Mylon, then to take care of them during that process, to make sure nobody suffered as badly as she did. And her third wish, again, an unselfish request, but you could say in a way it was for her, for Dwynwen, because she asked that she should remain unmarried for the rest of her life. And if God ensured that, she would be able to do nothing but to devote her entire life to God's service. Every minute, every waking minute of every day, she would dedicate to God. And to do that, she took the nun's habit and set off to establish a remote haven by building a church somewhere in Wales. And she did just that. And we can visit that site nowadays. And her first church, her original church, is thought to have been built around the year 460 amongst the waves off the coast of Anglesey, with this incredible view which takes in Snowdonia National Park on land and looking out to Caernarfon Bay. This was to be the place where Dwynwen established her church. Now, it is now called Ynys Llanddwyn, or Llanddwyn Island in English. And while it remains uninhabited, it's easy enough to visit, as long as you check the tides first and things, of course, be careful. And by doing so, you will be walking in the footsteps of countless pilgrims who have made the same journey for centuries and still continue to do so now. If not entirely for pious reasons, now maybe it's just to have a look at the wonderful view, or to treat your other half on Dydd Santes Dwynen. Now, when you get to the island, you will find the remains of a church. Now, sadly, not the original church, which is believed to date from 460, but a 16th century church which is thought to have been built on the site of the original church. So in theory, you can still go to where Dwynwen is said to have established her church. And more striking than that, there are two gigantic crosses which really stand out on the skyline here. If you go there when the sun is setting and look for these crosses on this quite barren island, it's quite a striking photo opportunity, really. If you're one of those people who likes going places just to take selfies to show off on social media, it's the ideal place for that. It's a wonderful spot. But these two crosses do have a significance to them. They're not just random crosses which were put there. In fact, they were put there not that long ago, considering the history of the island. It was in the early 20th century by a man called F.G. Wynne, who was the owner at the time. Now, the more decorative one, the Celtic cross, the kind of cross I'm sure you're familiar with, but again, these images are all on search engines if you'd like to have a look at them. But the more decorative cross, which has inscriptions on it, has the English language on one side and Welsh on the other, while the second cross is very plain in comparison. It's just a straightforward cross. One line going up and a shorter line going across. A cross, as we are all familiar with seeing in churches and so on. But it's very deceptive, the meaning, because while the Celtic one might look fancier, it is the other cross which symbolises the purity of Dwynwen. That one symbolises Dwynwen's true meaning, I guess. And so it's a nice balance between the two. And while I've dwelt on people already being in love and visiting the island as a couple so far, of course, Dwynwen was there for everyone. And if you had no love, if you were looking for love, if you'd been unsuccessful up until now, and you went there to ask for Dwynwen's help, maybe the simpler cross might be a good place to head to as well. And on the other hand, let's say you do already have someone, but you're not entirely sure if they are the right person for you. Well, the remains of Dwynwen's well, which can also be found on the island, are said to be a good way of testing out their truthfulness. And to do that, you observed the movements of, in inverted commas, sacred eels that were supposed to be in that well. Whether you'll find sacred eels there nowadays, I don't know. I guess you'll just have to go and find out, won't you? Maybe Dwynwen makes these sacred eels appear to those who need them. And finally, there are the lighthouses on the island as well, which, to the best of my knowledge, have no real folklore attached to them other than they just look a bit lovely. All of which I think is a fantastic excuse to go for a pilgrimage off the Anglesey coast this January. Turn your back on St Valentine's Day, save the money, save the hundreds of pounds you would have spent on a bunch of roses and use it to go and visit Ynys Llanddwyn instead. Now, as I mentioned at the start, there are a lot of variations of the main story out there. There's a bit more to talk about the island as well. So maybe we will return to Santes Dwynen not maybe, I'm almost certain we will return to Santes Dwynen very soon on this podcast. If not, maybe this time next year, maybe we'll make it an annual pilgrimage, a podcast pilgrimage, if such a thing exists. If not, I've just invented it. Maybe we'll make it an annual pilgrimage every January to look a little bit deeper into the real secrets surrounding Santes Dwynen. And if you have anything to add to that yourself, I would love to hear from you, so please get in touch. Who knows, I might be able to use it on the next pilgrimage episode. And it's always great to hear from people if you want to talk about Dydd Santes Dwynen or just say hello. I'm quite easy to track down online. There's my website, and I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Just do a search for Mark Rees. And if you put the word ghosts or folklore or Wales in or something, I will pop up on top. And as usual, if you don't want to miss the next Santes Dwynen episode, whenever that might be, please consider hitting the subscribe button and you will never miss an episode ever. And on that note, it just leaves me to say that I hope you all have a fantastic Dydd Santes Dwynen Day. Even if you've never heard of it before, this is going to be the first time. I hope it'll become an annual tradition for you now. Dydd Santes Dwynen every January the 25th. Although I should put a little disclaimer in there, a little asterisk to say that yes, every January the 25th in the northern half of Wales, but traditionally they would do things slightly differently in the south back in the good old days, and Welsh folklore tells us that, and to quote, "In South Wales, on the shores of the Severn Sea, the festival of Dwynwen was held in April, because, it is asserted, she last visited the earth then, and left in her footprints the blossoms of spring." Now, there is a lot to take in there in the last 30-odd seconds of this podcast, but I think that harks back to some other fascinating folklore from some other cultures. But that, as they say, is a story for another day, and I'll just leave it there to tease you for now. Until next time, I've been Mark Rees. This has been my Ghosts and Folklore podcast. It's the best, it's the beautiful, it is the only Ghosts and Folklore podcast beaming to you from Wales to the world. Thank you for listening. Diolch yn fawr iawn am gwrando. And until next week, at the same bat time on the same bat channel, be sure to spread the love far and wide, just like Santes Dwynen would do. No star.